Many people have tried to explain God's existence, one being Thomas Aquinas, who was a friar, Catholic priest, and doctor of the Church. He created 5 ways of explaining God's existence by using logic and reason, located in the Summa Theologica. His 5 ways include way of motion, way of causality, way of contingency, way of degree of perfection, and the way from design. We will be focusing on only 3 of his 5 ways, which include the way of motion, way of contingency, and way of degree of perfection. One of Thomas Aquinas' ways is the way of motion. He explains that something gets put in motion by something else already in motion. You can't have an infinite chain of movers. You have one initial mover that puts itself into motion, and that is God. For us, God puts us in motion. This is like Newton's balls. A hand has to pull the ball back and release it for that initial ball to hit the one next to it, and then so on. The hand in this situation is like God. He is the starting motion that puts the rest of the balls, or us, into motion.
Another one of Thomas Aquinas' ways is contingency. To be contingent means to be dependent on something/someone in order to exist or have something else exist. Life is born from parents. You cannot exist without your parents, and your parents cannot exist without their parents, and so on. The generations of life trace back to God, who isn't contingent upon anyone to exist. He just exists.
The 4th argument of Thomas's theory is properties that come in degrees. He says how there's an ultimate standard of perfection that all people live up to. The ultimate standard for people to live up to is God, as He's the highest form of perfection. This can be seen in the school setting as students work for straight A's, as this is the ultimate standard of perfection in education, and how people compare their grades against this standard. While Thomas Aquinas' 5 ways, motion, causality, contingency, properties that come in 2 degrees, and from design help us know that God exists, through some of our own experience where we have felt God's presence allows us to justify His experience.
A time when I felt God in my life was during junior year, when me and my mom got into a car accident, not even half a block away from my house. It was when we were on the way to school, and my mom did not have a stop sign, and she did not see the other car coming. She continued, and a teen driver T-boned us. We came out with aching muscles and a bruise or 2. I believe God was with my mom and I during that accident because He protected us from getting hurt really badly, even though the guy who hit us was going really fast.
A time in my life when I felt God's presence was the summer of junior year. I had just gotten my license and was driving home with my friend. I was only a couple blocks away from my house, and someone had cut me off on a very busy street, and I couldn't brake in time, and I crashed into their car. Due to my speed, I should have been at least a little bit bruised, but God was with me, and both me and my friend got out of the accident completely fine with no injuries. Not even the airbags went off in my car, and the person in the other car was also completely fine.
A time during my life that I felt God's presence was during my first hip surgery. It was my first major procedure, and I had a strong support system around me. But I was still scared of what could happen, and when I did have those doubts, I knew that God was there. I started to stop looking about the negatives and wondering about the what-ifs, and focus on the positive aspects of my life. I believe that God guided me down that path of positive thinking to help me deal with what was going on. While during the rehab process, there were moments where I thought it was getting too hard and just wanted to give up. But with God's motivation and constant reassurance that I felt with His presence, I was able to keep pushing and get to where I am today.
In our lives, we have found God's presence for which we don't need to use Thomas's ways to justify. However, the 5 ways of motion, contingency, properties that come in degrees, causality, and way of design can help others understand God's existence a little better and can be used for people who have not experienced God in their lives or have doubts about His existence. 3 of Thomas's 5 ways, contingency, motion, and degree of perfection, we feel helps explain and justify God's existence the most effectively. In conclusion, you can understand God's existence either through personal experiences or try to use the 5 ways to help you if you have any doubts.